Hello, my friend, and welcome to this episode of A Call to Leadership. I'm Dr. Nate Sala, your host, and I'm so glad you are here. Well, if you've been in a marriage, you know it's not always bonbons and roses. Sometimes it's tough. I mean, really tough, to the point to where you're not even sure if this is going to work. I have hope for you, my friend. It is not over until it's over. I have invited Matthew Brackett back on the show to talk about some practices in marriage that can perhaps help to turn the tide. Can't wait for you to listen in. I'm Dr. Nate Sala, and this is A Call to Leadership. Matthew, so good to have you on the show again. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Nate. It's great to be here again with you, your people. As you know, well, at least I always enjoy these conversations.
Oh my goodness. Same here. And Happy New Year and Merry Christmas to you as well. Yes, at the recording of this, it's a new year, which is a great time to talk about some aspects of the journey of leadership when it comes to family and marriage. Of course, the show is for the person who is interested in business, family, and life and leadership. And so you've had some tremendous insights over the years from your experience and your background, and also the fact some of the things you're currently doing today are super, super cool in this space. My wife and I had a wonderful opportunity to participate in one of your programs, a very abridged version of it. And we found so much merit. And I thought, what a great conversation to have, especially around the stresses that people face this time of year, and of course throughout the year, but especially after the holidays and the challenges people have in their marriages. This is not something new. This is not something novel. It's been going on for many, many years. In fact, statistics are fairly consistent over the years. Marriages don't always work. We know that there are struggles and trials within marriages. I'll give you some stats. According to the American Psychological Association, approximately 40 to 50% of marriages in the United States end in divorce. So that's staggering. I mean, that's every time you go to the altar, I should say every other time that you attend a wedding, it's likely that one of those two will not survive. And so this is an epidemic. If you think about like a disease, right, that affects 1 out of 2 people, it's massive. Right. And so this is an area that we need to discuss. We need to have real conversations around the challenges people face, the struggles they have internally, and perhaps some of the ways that we can not just cursorily go over, what we should do, but perhaps some real opportunity for healing, for wellness, for hope. In the journey of marriage. So it's heavy. I laid a lot on you right there, but you're capable. So here's some common causes of marriage failure that are statistically shown, and I'd like to hear your opinion on
Sure.
what you've seen in your sphere that's perhaps most resonant, or perhaps haven't been. Perhaps there's more of a general. Different things are for different people, but here's a top 5. Number 1, communication. Poor communication, lack of effective communication. We know this in leadership, right? In leadership, we know that communication is so important between partners, which and this is partners in business, partners in life, misunderstandings, resentment, conflict, all kinds of things that are challenges in marriage. Number 2, right. Infidelity. Another, extramarital affairs, acts of betrayal. And of course, what we lose a trust and damage emotional connection. Well, we'll get back to these. I just want to get them out.
Sure.
Financial problems, money. Of course, right now, again, holidays, you bought lots of presents, you took some trips, and now the credit card bills are going to come, right? Or perhaps the job isn't going to give you the bonus or the raise. Perhaps if there even is work to be had, right? So lots of money-related issues, debt, stress, all of it constrain a marriage. Number 4, lack of compatibility. So, differences in not necessarily, hey, oh my goodness, we got married in Vegas on Tuesday, we met on Monday. Not necessarily that lack of compatibility, but differences in values, goals, lifestyles, personalities. Of course, lots of dissatisfaction there. And number 5, substance abuse addiction, problems related to substance abuse can stress and strain a marriage. We see today, especially in the United States, um, such a tragic scenario, such a tragic um, um, uh, uh, it's another epidemic of drugs, meth, and different drugs that have just infiltrated lives and families, and I've seen them firsthand destroyed lives.
Mm.
So of these five, is there one that you've seen that's like this is the number one, or is it different for everybody?
Wait, let me before I answer that, if you're okay,
I knew you were gonna say before I answer that. I love it. Yes, please.
I want to couch sort of our conversation, and in the work that I do dedicate myself to leadership, but I call it a holistic approach to how I lead myself, how I lead in my intimate circles, and then professionally in organizational context. This conversation fits really how I lead in my intimate inner circles of influence. And we talk about leadership. Leadership is influence, and you're like, why don't we ever talk about this? In marriage, well, because and it's so true. It's so maybe it's so obvious there, or people don't relate leadership to marriage. And it's not that either has, it's not like either has power or authority over another. That's not what this conversation is about. But if leadership is influence, or the process of influence to reach a common goal, or I know you have a different definition. There's different definitions. I talk about empowerment and personal development in leadership, reaching personal potential. But it's a process of influence, right? And towards a common goal, or however else you want to say it. And so in that sense, of course, in marriage, there's leadership. Of course, in marriage, there's influence. And we want that influence to be positive. And influence comes from a Latin word meaning influere, to pour into. I like that image because it's helpful to understand what really influence means. We want to pour into. And if I had a glass here, we could pour something life-giving like water into it, or I could pour toxic, something in, which would be, destructive. And leadership can go either way. But now in our context, we're talking about positive. So, and how do I pour into my spouse? Through my being and through my behavior, through who I am and through how I behave and how I speak and attitudes. And so this process of influence is definitely present in couples and how we influence each other. So that's sort of couching our conversation around, and your question. And so the work and it's so difficult because, at least for marketing purposes, how I market myself, because there's different, as I talked about, there's different type of leadership development work that I do. But I believe so much in family and in the importance of relationships and of marriage, because it's the foundation of society. Right. And so that's why I consider it so important. And in that relationships, what I find, in going back to your question around communication and relationships, what's so fascinating is, human beings, we've been in relationships ever since we've existed, right? We are relational beings and we are communicative beings, but it's something that is so hard for us to do for some reason, right? That it's so challenging, right? In leadership and in relationships and in marriage. The first cause of divorce, communication, right? And it's something so basic to us as human beings, yet so intricate and complex, right?
Absolutely.
So in your, going back to your question, what have I seen? I definitely, it's communication is one thing. And I think with the way society has developed in recent years, with evolved in many ways with social media and all that, I think there's challenges in communication. And then what makes communication difficult in the context of marriage and a committed relationship is, well, we filter everything we say and everything that we hear through different filters that we have. And we often don't take time to maybe to mirror that back, or to understand what the other is hearing. Right? And communication it's a dynamic process.
Yeah. Yeah.
Between someone who has a message, the content of that message, and who receives it. Right? And we can sometimes be sort of dictatorial in our communication, where I have a message and here it is, receive it. But how has it been received? What's being understood? What's being interpreted? And we're like, oh, well, that's not what I meant to say. But through not clarifying communication. There's a lot of hurt, there's a lot of resentment. We can leave a lot of things unsaid, and we can make assumptions, we can draw conclusions, and we don't deal with that. So I think in communication, a lot of times not dealing with, we're brushing a lot of things under the carpet, hoping that they'll resolve themselves. And as we know, and even in leadership, a lot of things, they don't resolve themselves unless we intentionally try to resolve them.
Well, I think that's such an important distinction, especially I love the way you've ended that with the idea of intentionality and the word picture of the message, the sender, the receiver. We very we can learn so much from that way of thinking. That when I communicate, when I have a message, whether it's verbal, nonverbal communication, written, a number of different methods that we communicate. I I lay that message at your feet, and then you read that message or you hear that message, and somehow or another, then you have an interpretation, an understanding of that message. In fact, I love the definition of communication as an exchange of ideas. It's so simple, yet it's effective, right? This is an exchange of ideas. So when we're communicating, I have an idea that I present to you, you have an idea you present to me. We exchange. And so many people have lost this idea, especially when we talk, as you said, we talk at people, or we can be condescending or belittling or authoritarian, and we're really not communicating at that point. A dictatorial communication is a true exchange. And so when we view it in that way, then say, okay, wow, what is it that you're presenting to me? And what is it that I'm presenting to you? And I love the way you even laid a foundation of our conversation around this pouring into one another. Because in a sense, communication then, if we're exchanging ideas, we're really pouring into one another. Perhaps either a new way to understand something, perhaps a validation of how I understand what you've stated, how perhaps it's a question, help me to better understand. And I wonder how much maturity is necessary to effectively communicate, because you talk about a lot of different things like baggage and whatnot that people may have, and we use that terminology, baggage. It's perhaps those are some preconceived um, ideas. Perhaps there's pain and hurt, trauma
Mhm.
in a person's life. I mean, eh, as you said, as simple as communication is, being that we've been communicating as humans for how long, right? Ever since we were born. I mean, ever since humanity
Right.
became a species on this planet, the first, the first baby's cry was communication. And so, yet at the same time, we find it so difficult sometimes
Mm.
to effectively communicate because of the complexities of the human being and the human
Yes.
experience.
Right. I think we just underestimate it. And I think going back to a cause, maybe a cause of divorce or cause of friction, I would even backtrack to marriage preparation or preparation for a committed relationship. Oftentimes, I use the word decide and slide. Oftentimes, we slide into commit. Nowadays, there's a lot of sliding into committed relationships because there's a lot of cohabitation, which sounds like a good idea for a lot of different reasons. And then people slide into this reality then where they're committed to each other, but without really having made an intentional or a totally conscious decision about it. Again, nothing against cohabitation, but the numbers aren't great for cohabitation and the level of divorce, right? They're directly related. So it's about sliding. So in marriage preparation or preparing for committed relationships, if we prepared for our relationship the way we intentionally prepare for the festivities of a marriage, okay, for those who have festivities and parties, they want where are we going to have the celebration, the meal, and this, and all the different details. If they prepared so intentionally for that commitment, I think we'd be a lot better off. So I would even go back to marriage preparation for a committed relationship,
Yeah.
right? And I think government, a lot of whether it be church bodies, faith organizations, or government, I think it's something that, holy smokes, I think a high rate divorce is not good for the economy, is not good for a lot of things and stability in society. So, I mean, governments look at, well, and faith without getting too involved in people's personal lives, but there's some sort of requirement that if you're going to, in the name of the law, or in a faith, or and in the name of God, if you're going to commit to each other, well, let's try to prepare better for this, because the statistics show that we haven't been very good at it.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because, and this is likely going to turn into a multi-part series. I already see it 15 minutes in, which is fantastic. And let me just preface to say, I've been married for over 2 decades now. I don't have a perfect marriage. I don't know that there is such a thing, if you will, as a perfect marriage. However, we did preparation, as you had mentioned early on, probably not as much as we could have. However, the preparation is such an important aspect of any commitment, any agreement. And this is what it is. It's an agreement. And not only any agreement, but as you rightly stated, the fabric of human society is the relationship that we have. Interestingly, as you're saying that, and I've thought about this before, and I brought it up on the show many moons ago. You think about the preparation that's involved in, you had mentioned government, in city planning. Say, for example, a bridge. Many of us have driven down a road and there was some kind of a new structure, bridge being built, and a road was closed, or a pass was closed. And I've thought about that. You think about that, Matthew, as you drive by every single day, and you think about the progress in the building of that bridge and how long it takes, months, sometimes years. But that's not even the beginning of it. That's actually the end of the preparation, because before that bridge even started, before there was groundbreaking, there was engineering, there was planning, there was site visits, there were permits, there were funding aspects of it. How much is it going to cost? Is it going to be safe? How do we make sure that this bridge will stand the test of time? And I wonder as I drive by these new construction sites, as all these, if we put that level of intentionality, as you'd mentioned, into the preparation of our cohabitation, how much stronger would the bridge of our marriage be to stand the test of time?
Yes. And I like the image of the bridge because it's sort of like the bridge between, if we're two islands, or two lands, but also the bridge between two people.
Yeah.
Right. And that, so thank you for that. And the same thing could be used with business. Those that are listening, if you're in a professional life, or you run a business, or you're just part of a business, the intentionality that goes into running a business. I look at your marriage as some sort of, it's not a business, but yes, but in a certain way. And are we running our marriage with the same intentionality and awareness and consciousness that we run our businesses, right? And oftentimes, and I'll backtrack again to just what, courtship and dating and all of that, where there's a lot of intentionality in that aspect of it. But something happens when people end up in cohabitation, or end up in a committed relationship. There's something about courtship that's in friendship that sometimes stops. And it's all very unconscious, I think, because no one does it intentionally, but it's so important, that so much time dedicated into building that relationship. Well, how much more when we're in a committed relationship, that we are staying committed to our friendship, to our intentionality and the way we do it. And so I often use the phrase of investing every day intentionally in my relationship. And that can be with a small thing, whether it be a hug and a kiss, or just something that's but it's intentional. And I'm doing this to build my relationship. Every week, I'm doing something a little bit more. Every month, a little bit more involved, but something to develop. And every year, a marriage retreat, and it doesn't have to be a faith-based people, but nowadays the word retreat has become more common. Nowadays, they don't relate it to faith. So it's just about taking time away as a couple. There's so many types of marriage activities. And I would even say to couples, if you do go to the same retreat every year, you're like, oh, I already went to that one. It will speak to you in a different way from one year to the next because you're somewhat of a different person. You're in a different place. Something that didn't resonate the year before will resonate this time. So find something faith-based, not faith-based, or if you are a person of faith, kind of go back and forth because I think there's value in both. And to take time away to intentionally invest. It's kind of like your planning session for the year.
Yeah.
The same thing that you would do in your business, same thing in our relationship. And then if you have children, well, we have a whole project as a family. And what's our goal as a couple? What's our goal as a family? What are the values and principles that bring us together and that we try to lead our family by? So anyway, establishing those things more intentionally is, I think, would bring so much good to people, to happiness, to contentment, and to the ability to resolve the smaller things that the small wrinkles in marriage and in relationships. It would make society better. It would make so many things better.
Yeah. So someone listening now is saying, well, that takes a lot of work.
Yes.
Yes.
Well,
I didn't.
relationships, I think, and good love takes a lot of work. My motto is lead better, love better, and live better. And I think anything that we want to do well takes a lot of work. And if you want to love well, it takes a lot of work, but it's a beautiful thing. It's beautiful, but it does. Even, I was on a program not too long ago about sex, right? Even good sex takes a lot of work, right? I won't go on a tangent here about so many things about just the dating world, relationship world, even a lot of going back to your own numbers, but even human beings are having less sex than ever before. And you wouldn't think that, but it's just because the dating world and relationship world has changed so much. But anyways, but everything, even something so beautiful as sex, but yes, but over time, that also takes investment and work. So it does. It all does.
Yeah, and I think the prioritization then falls into the realm of how important is the impact? How important is the outcome of your investment in
Mhm.
your family, in your marriage? Because if the investment is not attractive enough to be worthwhile to achieve what you desire, then you won't see it as work that's worth doing.
Mhm.
However, on the other side, if you believe that it is an essential aspect of your journey and your legacy and how you would like to be remembered as someone who committed fully to this uh, this beautiful journey, then the work is it's a labor of love, as you had mentioned,
It
love.
is. It is hard. Life has become also the society has changed so much. The rhythm of life has changed for so many people. It's so intense, right? Fast paced. And so, and this, we're dealing with the urgent things and rightly so. This is not a critique. And so marriage or committed relationship can easily just take the back seat
Mm.
because we'll get to that, we'll get to that, we'll get to that. Right. And so just really it's a labor of love. It's a beautiful thing. And if you look at the big picture of life, well, it's one of the long-term investments that you're making, right? In someone.
Indeed. And back to what you had mentioned about the retreat, maybe that's just what someone needs right now. Perhaps it's not the big elephant of, oh my goodness, there's so many things in my marriage that I know that could be more effective and be better, but I don't know where to start. Sometimes it is just the 3 day getaway or the whatever it looks like to
Right.
just take time to be in the company of others who perhaps have had similar struggles and others who can encourage and provide guidance and just to get away
Right.
from the challenges that you face at
Mhm.
home on a
Yeah.
daily basis can be so life-giving.
Mm. Yeah, break the routine and go to something. And again, where you're receiving some sort of, I think, somewhat guided because you could just take your spouse on a nice vacation. It won't be the same, right? There'll be a lot of things that won't be that way. So it's a sort of facilitated experience, right? And you and your wife, you were very, very kind to allow me into that sacred. And I say this because we have a hard time, and married couples have a hard time inviting someone because it is a very intimate, sacred space. Like who are we? And more so as men, I'm not going to let anyone into this space, right? This is mine. But oftentimes we need someone to facilitate the conversation, right? Either between the spouses or just to bring up new things that we're going to think about that we hadn't thought about. And going to the assessment that I use, which I love it because it's just as you experience, it's so detailed and sophisticated in the amount of data that it brings to the surface. Right? And we were able to hone into, well, really, what are the fundamental challenges or aspects that we can intentionally work on. Usually there's just a few, but it's oftentimes when we don't know, it's like, well, it's, any type of mess, we're like, well, I don't know where to start, right? And then you're not expected to know where to start. But that's why these things exist, so that you can help give you clarity around where you want to start.
I'd love to talk more about that as well, because these assessments, these ways that we identify areas that we are working well in, perhaps some blind spots, areas that we haven't discussed that we need to discuss. Yes, they can be uncomfortable. However, with a trusted guide who has, as you had mentioned, this, you invite into the sacred areas of the marriage, who has insight on perhaps some ways that you can uncover those areas of conflict, or in some areas that you have, you could use a little pat on the back
Right.
on with some affirmation. I
Mhm.
remember, Matthew, from when my wife and I were pre-weds and even newlyweds, going into doing retreats and assessments that we still talk about today,
Mm.
over 2 decades later, that illuminate some of our behaviors and give us opportunity for grace for one another. For example, the DISC assessment, we did the DISC assessment many, many, many years ago. And so at the time, my I level was kind of high and my D was kind of behind it. So it was an assessment that said Nate loves the social interaction. And so this has not changed, by the way. However, my wife's was not so high. And
Right.
so recognizing that she loves social interaction, but in a much different way, much more intimate way, and one-on-one or a very small
Mm.
group. Where I love to have larger
Right.
interactions. I love a small group too, but
Sure.
but just knowing these nuances about one another creates a better understanding of where we are comfortable,
Mm.
where we are challenged, and then even then. So we still have conversations around that, like though, I to when we go into a social setting, to be clear on what is our intention as a couple, as a team, as we
Right.
go into the social setting. And because I tend to look at marriage as in some ways, I haven't been in the military. I'm fascinated with the military, but as a military unit, we are on a mission together as a team, and I've got your six, you've got my six, right? We've got each other's backs, and I have to know what type of tools you have and resources to accomplish the mission alongside of me and me alongside of you, and we co-lead in these ways because you lead in ways that are play to your strengths. I lead in ways that play to my strengths. But it's also important to have conversations around that so we understand how each of us leads. In fact, this is the lead up to your assessment. Excuse me. What we did with your assessment is one of the things I'd love to share is that one area that we were illuminated on was the area of finances. My wheelhouse, a strength, obviously, is the financial side of life. My wife's never, I don't even know if she's even looked at our tax return since we got married, because she trusts me with that area of making sure that we have provisions made and making sure the investments are in the right places and so on and so forth. At the same time, what was uncovered through our time together was that though she does fully trust me in these areas, she would not be offended if I shared more about that process and milestones on a regular basis. And this was new to me. After all these years, I just thought, hey, I'll just handle it and just let me know if you have any questions, kind of thing. But what was uncovered was that, hey, if we had a meeting once a month or even quarterly on some of these aspects of our financial life picture, that there would be an additional layer of feeling as though she was part of it and comfort and support in that area. So again, huge win for us because
Right.
your ability to pull that out through an assessment and then purposefully and carefully guide us through that the process.
Thank you, Nate. Thank you. And it was abbreviated version, but again, so helpful. And the thing about these, and science has developed so much. There's a lot of great assessments. There's a lot of great information out there, a lot of great research, and it's using that. And you go back to the disc thing, before you got married, what? Because it's about seeing the other, right? And what these assessments do, and no assessment is dogmatic by no means, but it sheds light on how the other person is wired. And if and that might even resolve a lot of conflict and misunderstandings in relationships. That's because that's not ill intentions. That's just the way they are. Right. And sure, maybe it's also an area of opportunity, but it's that's the way they are. And to fall in love with that as well. That's a beautiful thing about the person that I married, is that that's the way they are. And that's probably why I was attracted to them in the first place. So it's knowing how to see the other better, knowing how to love the other better. And I also understanding the needs of each other. Now, in a committed relationship, in a marriage where you want to hurt the other, it's where you hold back on satisfying those needs. That's because I know that that's a way that I can punish my spouse. The needs are like gas tanks for us as human beings. And so again, going back to influence, how can I pour life into my spouse? So we have certain needs. So we speak different love languages. And so to learn that language, to understand the needs, this is my way to give life to my spouse. And isn't that what we want to do when we get married? We want to give life to our spouse. And through that life giving, we also want to give life to children oftentimes. So it's giving life to each other. And then the last point I would mention here is about seeing the other better, loving the other better, satisfying their needs better in those love languages. The other one is offering much more affirmation and validation, building each other up. A lot of times we highlight things that we don't like or whatever, and this happens in the workplace as well. I would say the same thing about the workplace and just in the whole feedback thing. But it's people want to know also what our strengths are and where we're doing it all right. And if we're not, I think the first place where I should be getting validation and affirmation is from my spouse. Right. And so as couples, and this is for all the listeners out there, let's try to do this better. Try to love each other better. Try to offer each other more validation, more affirmation, build each other up. And then you're going to be able to face challenges a lot better. You're going to face conflicts better. You're going to have more constructive conversations because each of you are going to feel loved and seen and valued, appreciated, recognized. And in the end, isn't that what we all want as human beings?
Indeed. Yeah, indeed. And to me, that is where the beauty of the relationship is perhaps rekindled if the flame has withered.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I want to read something to you that I received a message from my wife just speaking to this just last month, and came out of nowhere, and it just completely changed my day and my entire week. She just said, love you, hon. Thanks for spending time with me last night and helping me this weekend. One of her love languages, of course, is that teamwork and working as a team. Just wanted to tell you that. Hope you have a good day. It wasn't, it wasn't over the top. It was simply an acknowledgement and a sincere message of care, and it was so incredibly just beautiful to me, and that connectedness and that reminder, and it changed how I approach the rest of my day, and to think, well, you know what? How about the affirmation that I can then reciprocate?
Right.
And I share that to say sometimes it's important not to wait for the other person to lead in this way. If you're conscious and aware that there's a possibility for you to pour into and influence your spouse, then don't wait. Send the message, write the note, give a sincere and genuine message of affirmation, of love and care, and perhaps we'll find ways to to perhaps to strengthen that bridge that we're building together. Now, and this is only a very small aspect of this. Of course, there are deep wounds and conflicts and challenges that marriages face. Especially, I'm sure you've experienced not only in your present circumstances as someone who is engaged in helping marital couples through your program and through the assessments. And we'll make sure that's all in the show notes before someone listens or watches on social media. However, even I'm sure in the 30 years of you doing work in the ministry, I'm sure you've experienced some of that as well, where there's been some deep challenges, and I don't want to make light of that. I don't want to say that, oh, there's just an easy answer for all of these challenges. It can be very tragic, and our hearts are go out to those who have experienced very difficult situations, either in their marriages or outside of their marriages, that have been brought into the marriages as well.
Right. Yes. No, that's so, and we're not trying to oversimplify marriage throughout this conversation, as you well know. It's complex, but
It's complicated.
What we're trying to highlight is some of the important elements, and also just that when we invest more intentionally in it, right, and when we maybe bring a third party, whether it be a retreat or some sort of event, or whether it be an individual, like the work that I do, into the conversation, even though it's a very intimate, that's a very vulnerable thing to do, but that might be life-changing.
Yeah, indeed. Thanks,
So
Matt.
thank you.
We got to do this again. This has got to be we've got to take it to the next level, because I want to hear more about some of the other areas on our next conversation that perhaps are even more challenging than just having communication issues. Some of the other issues, perhaps infidelity, abuse, things of that nature that are pretty weighty in a relationship. Yeah.
Yes.
Love to have you back.
So much more to talk about. But thank you, Dr. Nate. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you.